Hi, I'm Kate Soper. I'm a composer and performer, and this is a short instructional video with some notes on the techniques for the soprano part of Cipher, which is a duo for soprano and violin that I wrote for myself and the inimitable Josh Modney, violinist, to perform. And it's from 2012. It's also part of a larger work of mine now called Ipsa Dixit, which also includes a flute and soprano duo that I have another instructional video about. So let's dive in. I'm going to start, I'm just going to go through and order some things that I think are difficult to maybe fully comprehend from the score through no fault of your own. That might be useful to hear about how I interpret it as a singer and how I thought of it as a composer. So looking at the performance notes of the published score, the first kind of general comment is, the most important performance element of Cipher is total synchrony between the performers. This is especially true in movement 1, where performer synchrony is much more important than fidelity to the written rhythms, and in movement 2, where character and tone must also be matched. But it is a general and crucial principle of every moment of the piece. So it might be kind of baffling or frustrating to see a composer say that, something's more important than the actual accuracy of the notation. So I just kind of want to explain a little bit what I meant by this idea that performer synchrony is more important than the notated rhythm, especially in movement 1. So movement 1, and we'll also talk about the circles on top of this, on top of the vocal line and what they mean. But this is written in, as you saw, maybe kind of very erratic rhythms, very complex, unfilled tuplets and constant rhythmic fluctuations and this kind of thing. What I was trying to do when I wrote it was really capture the incredible flexibility and erratic nature of the speech, the text that I was setting, which is just sort of speech rhythms. So that's kind of why those rhythms evolved. But then I found, as I developed this piece with Josh as a performer, that my performance evolved and in some ways took a shape that was a little bit different from the notated rhythms. So I just wanted to make sure that if you're a singer and violinist who want to take this piece on, that you feel the same ability to think about these rhythms in a way that kind of suits just the flow of the piece. So it's not, an invitation to improvise or anything, but just something about the idea that you should be able to kind of shape your performance of this. So and if you watch performances of me and Josh playing this piece, you might notice that it's not like 100% accurate. So I was trying to get at it, but just sort of think about what is going to be the most tight rhythmic blend for you and the violinist. Now about the actual vocal sound here. So in movement 1. This is on page 2 of the notes. I'll just skip to the middle of the paragraph, which says the desired effect is one in which it is clear due to timbral variations produced by lip and mouth movement that words are being pronounced, but these words should be unintelligible. Lip-mouth movements may be exaggerated to aid both the aural and the visual impression of words being sung. So I think it's useful, those of you who are composers, to start with the idea of the desired effect, because then you might have, especially if you're a composer-performer, a way that you like to do it, but someone else might have a take on it that gets the effect across. Basically this is an idea of having some technique that is obscured speech, but still singing and still the shape and the sort of general sound of words happening versus clear, intelligible words. And this is indicated with these filled in circles that mean the obscured technique and open circles that mean the normal technique. So what I say to do is filled in circle is breathy and closed off. Press the middle of the tongue against the roof of the mouth while singing with a breathy tone. So versus and the reason that the instruction about the exaggerated movement of the lips and mouth are there is that you do want it to sound like speech is just kind of behind a bunch of cotton balls or something. So get my pitch here. That might just sort of sound like, but if you really want it to be clear that something is being communicated and you want to have the kind of timbral stamp of words, just really try to make the shape of the vowels really clear because their timbral content is going to be so diminished by the vocal technique. And then once you have that really set, it'll be probably easier to kind of play with a transition between that and real clarity. And it should be, what you want is for the sense of words kind of coming in and out in this continuous way and this unpredictable way. And the unpredictability should go along with the kind of unpredictable rhythms that are written but that you might shape. So, just a little bit from just that opening, I wanted to be explicit. It became clear that for me to do it, etc. So just, find where your continuums are and just get comfortable moving between them. I was going to say something. There's dynamics are written into the score for this, but as you can see, it's kind of louder when it's more clear and less loud when it's not. So that could also just be thought of as another part of the technique. And then there's also speech in this opening section, which are written by just X note heads. And I would just say that, make sure that the pace and the kind of overall affect doesn't change when you slip into speech. So there should be a sense that these are just 3 different ways of pronouncing this text, and it's not interrupting the general sense of forward propulsion. Josh and I now kind of do this movement in a breakneck pace because we're very comfortable with it, so that might not be yours. There's a tempo marking of 8th equals 168. That's kind of fast, but so just whatever you do, just kind of try to keep it in the same pace. Whoops. Explicit. Things I came because about language. 2 came things about because language 1 came 2. Even when the language starts to disintegrate and become nonsense in terms of the word order, just, maybe feel yourself like you're always communicating something really clear, even though it's being kind of constantly obscured. I don't know. So that's the technique and general feeling of the opening movement. Then the next thing that is sort of like a fun, tricky thing is probably the tuning stuff, which is at the sort of the next part of this movement, starting on page 4, like this stuff in this system. So that I can't demonstrate because I need a violinist for that. But I just will say that maybe this is easier for some of you already, but when I was working on this, I was new to kind of tuning by ear in these precise intervals, and it does become easy because you really can audibly hear these artifacts that emerge when you're fitting into a very specific interval ratio based on a harmonic series. So, moving from A flat to G sharp really does work. You really will hear these different pitches based on the B flat and then the E fundamental. And I will just say that I have found it's an incredibly infinitesimal distance, or it's just very, very small. So, again, this is sort of pointless, but like, I almost kind of remember how it goes even without having Josh here because I've done it so many times, but it's just like almost like an eyebrow raise to move from the A flat to the G sharp. So just, if you work on it and get it, then you'll get it the next time, and then it'll start to sort of being a pitch that in your voice, this kind of microtonal deviation. And then just to really, try to hear the real dissonance when there's kind of a microtonal cluster at the bottom of that page of that system. I hope that the more accurate it is, the more it will be perceptible to the audience. I think it's a little difficult to hear when you're not standing next to each other, but that's the hope. Okay, so then I wanted to just talk a little bit about the vowels section, the movement 2. So this is based on some writings by Pietro Bembo. He was an Italian scholar in the 15th and 16th centuries, and kind of an early sort of linguist in a way, one of the first people who really wanted to study not just the meaning of words, but the sound of words. And he was also very interested in music. And of course, this was a very flourishing time for text and music in Italy, the Renaissance era. So he was really interested in this kind of triangulation between the meaning of words and the sound of the words and their setting to music, and how that could kind of combine to create this very deep total experience. He worked on a lot of Petrarch. So I wanted to take some very small excerpts from his description of the vowels. And what I liked about this section is that he really talks about these 4 vowels, a, I, u, and o, as not just having kind of vocal qualities, but really character almost in an anthropomorphized way, like having posture and kind of like personality and, being good or bad. So in order to perform this, I guess I would recommend really going into these characters and making them very specific, and that will also help with the music to bring it out both in this movement and in the section right before it and right after it, which I'll talk about. So again, the 4 vowels in the order that they're in the piece are a, u, I, and o. A and o are sort of more normal classical vocal technique, so they need to be really differentiated from each other, I think. And then I and U are a little bit more like extended technique-y. So the first vowel is very bright, and he talks about how it just sort of like sends all this energy like shooting out into the air. And something that helps me remember the brightness is that the violinist, while you're singing this vowel section, is like the violinist's characters are represented by each of the 4 strings. So a is correlated to the 1 string, and because the string is in a scordatura tuning, it's already a little bright, it's a little high. So in order to keep in tune with the violinist, you'll have to already kind of be on your tiptoes pitch-wise a little bit, even though you're just singing a D. So yeah, I just kind of like to add some, a little bit of nasalness to my voice and just kind of keep it up, into my nose. I guess that's what that means. And then just again to say that part of the ways that we characterize things as singers is not just what's happening in here, but our faces and our bodies and body language and stuff. So, just very open. Consciosia cosa che la più di spirito. Just sort of like let it all flow through your cheekbones. So that's and then U again, so this is sort of one of the extended technique ones. It says extremely nasal, pinched, scrunched, and ugly. So obviously you could just sing, but I think, pruning it up a bit will just help make these really clear. It's in Italian. It's in Old Italian. It's hard to understand. It just might help give the sense that, these are 4 distinct voices in a way. So yeah, just really at the front of your voice, just like nasal in a not like nasal as an aid to brightness as an but just really getting it all in the front of your face there. E, the next one, so it says extremely fragile, weak, but sweet, quadruple P. So just put a lot of breath into this one. This one is the only one I find can be a little uncomfortable because it's so breathy. And then the inverted carets are audible breath sound, so just sort of let that be part of the texture, let that kind of help you keep it really breathy. And I just sort of try to like kind of melt a bit, just sort of recede into this one physically. What was I going to say about that? It's okay, as just happened there, to have the phonation stop. So just have it be so fragile that your vocal cords are kind of like coming in and out of touching each other. And then O again, so this is more normal singing like with but just as warm as you can, as open as you can. I tend to sometimes do a little fake covered kind of versus consciosia cosa. So yeah, just very different, distinct characters, and depending on what kind of voice you have. One of them might sort of be most close to your actual sound, and you can work with that. And then hopefully they will all give you a chance to experiment with different colors and parts of your voice. So then once you have those, I think what's nice is then you can kind of use that to shape all of this kind of vowel material around this movement. So they are first introduced before the bembo properly starts, as just kind of the vowels in two systems in the bottom of page 5 here, and they kind of go from sliding into each other to being presented contiguously but separately to be presented very separately. So if you have those really embodied, it's easy to, as in measure 57, and then you can move from that into something a little bit more separate, and then you can move into the bembo. And then, of course, you'll have to work out your sound with the violinist to make sure that you kind of agree on some kind of real blend about those ideas. Moving right along, so getting out of this movement is this kind of, the vowel chain kind of turns into this building block for phonemes and for actual words, so trying to move now into intelligibility in a different way than it was done in the first movement. Let's see. So try to just make this a real thing that happens. So this is actually how I wrote this part, is I knew that I wanted to go through these vowels. Oh, sorry, I'll get back to that. But one thing I wanted to just point out is at the very end of this movement, or before this vowel fast chain happens, there's some moments of kind of complex rhythm again, but this time it's with these vowel colors, and this is one of the parts that Josh and I, even though we know this piece really well, have to always like run through 18 times before we perform it, because it's hard to then do these vowel characters in like a broken quintuplet and a 64th notes, but if you have them really embodied, you can. So I don't think that was totally right, but just try in that little tiny virtuosic burst to really kind of keep the vowels still who they are, even as they're moving quickly through the colors. So the morphing word thing, so when I was writing this, I wanted to go from this chain of vowels into a word, so I just kind of was singing the vowels, and then you kind of notice that a wah shape starts to become prominent the faster they get, and then you start to kind of pick out words that start with the wah sound, and eventually I thought, okay, while we, that's a phrase that could conceivably come out of that is starting to take shape, and I could probably find that in a poem somewhere, and I did, in this Michael Drayton poem, Lines from the Peak. A good poet. So just sort of enjoy that moment and try to do what you can to help the audience hear that this is happening. So maybe try to be extra clear by the time you get to while we, and extra clear at the beginning that they're just the vowels. You could even like bring some character into it, because there's, a motivational difference to whoever the speaker of the piece is between singing just vowels and singing while we as an invocation to this poem. So yeah, try to think about that. And the same thing happens then on the other end, in that then we go from so try to let that transition really be natural for you, and maybe also let your body language tell that story of, I'm not telling a story anymore, I'm singing vowels now. Just a side note, my favorite part of the piece to sing is the art song, as Josh and I call it, on page 9, that is the Drayton poem. You've only been singing a D mostly up until then, so it's kind of a nice moment for the soprano to leave her uncharacteristic position on that pedal point and just kind of like gallop off into the highs and the lows. So if you enjoy that, then I would just say let it show in performance. Okay, so then Freud, I can't really help with this movement because you really do need your violinist. But if you're doing this piece, I hope you have fun. I guess one thing I might say is that the moment when you get to improvise together with your both of you fingering the instrument, have fun with that too. Like listen to it and enjoy it. This is something that sort of changed for me and Josh over the years, is realizing that we really liked that moment and just having a little tiny space within a complex piece to just kind of play around is fun. Okay, so just one more section, maybe this section at the end, which is within the fourth movement. We call this robot. So this is also, moving around in continuums, and this is a continuum from inexpressivity to expressivity. So again, I think just making those two extremes really exaggerated will hopefully help for you to communicate what's going on, if not why. So starts on an E so that the violinist can use the open string, which you have retuned. It says non-espressivo, non-vib, robotic. So I would take robotic again to refer to not just the production of the tone and the sound of your voice, but really your whole character. Just where's the wrong pitch? Like almost try to eliminate the physical movement from your body, so it's like someone's just pressing a button in your throat or something, and then that will help before the words come in for that to be a really clear distinction between ah on a robotic pitch and ah in an expressive way. You can kind of just like let some light come into your eyes, or just move your body a bit, and it will be clear. That wasn't a great robot at the beginning, but I think you get the idea. I like to do a little hard glottal. That's not that hard, but just, something to really make it sound like it's being instigated by some trigger. And then let that slowly morph into the text. And then into this kind of more song-like part. And the song-like part, I think the only thing to remember is just that the dynamics are a little odd. The soprano goes down to a low dynamic sometimes. So just, it's hard to comprehend an instrumentalist sometimes as the foreground, for the auditory system to comprehend that. So just don't be afraid to like really step back and let the violinist take the foreground as you kind of switch it off. And anything else I wanted to say? I guess just the robot thing then in the next sort of part of this movement, it goes a little more quickly. So just, again, kind of try to retain those characteristics even as the music is moving more fast. So I'm talking kind of about page 16. So the eyes and the face might really help communicate this. I don't think I have this memorized anymore, but this goes from expressive to inexpressive to kind of quickly falling, just be conscious of what your body and face are doing, and your voice, and just the more in control of that you will be, of that transition, then I think the more clear the material will be. And it's probably a little more up to you than the violinist, because people are looking to you for expressive cues because you're the singer. Okay, I think those are the things that I thought were worth a mention. So if you are taking this one for a whirl, I hope that you enjoy yourself and have fun with your violinist partner. And thanks for watching this video.